I don't remember the first word she said to me, but I remember the way her voice sounded. Low, warm, and slightly frayed, like it carried years of stories she didn't bother telling. That was what made me look at her in the first place. Not in the obvious way people stare, but in the quiet way you watch something you're not sure you're allowed to touch. She was older, mid-40s, maybe, and she wore her age like it was a secret advantage. Not loud, not showy, but in the way her posture filled the room, how her gaze made you straighten without meaning to. And then she caught me. Her lips curved, just slightly, not a smile, not quite a challenge. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she asked. The question should have embarrassed me, but instead it steadied me. "Because," I said, before I could think better of it, "I can't look away." The air shifted. The room seemed too quiet, like even the walls had leaned closer. She tilted her head, studying me with a kind of amused suspicion, as though she couldn't decide if I was reckless or just naive. I wanted to say something else, anything, but the words caught. She was close enough that I noticed the faint scent of her perfume. Nothing sweet, nothing youthful, but something darker, elegant, something that didn't need to prove itself. She turned slightly, brushing past me to reach for a glass on the counter, and her hand grazed mine. Just that, the back of her fingers barely touching my skin, but it felt like my whole body had been marked by it. I kept still, too still. She noticed. Her eyes flicked back to mine, and there was the slightest hesitation in her expression, as if she wanted to pull away but didn't. Or maybe I just wanted to believe that. We stood like that for too long, not speaking, just watching, listening to the hum of silence between us. I realized how close we were only when I felt the heat of her breath, quick, restrained. My chest tightened, but I didn't step back. "You shouldn't say things like that," she said finally, her voice softer, the confidence in it laced with something I couldn't name. "Then don't ask me questions you don't want answered," I replied. Her lips parted, like she had something to say, but she let the silence stretch instead. Her fingers brushed the rim of the glass, then stilled. She was steady on the outside, but I noticed the smallest twitch in her hand, the way she exhaled slower than before. And I thought, she's not as untouchable as she looks. The moment tilted again. Neither of us moved. My pulse beat too loud in my ears, and hers. I swear I could almost feel it in the thin space between us. Then, the sound of footsteps in the hallway. We both turned, almost guiltily, as the door handle clicked. Her expression shifted in an instant, from open to guarded, from near to far away. She set the glass down, smoothed her hair as if nothing had happened, and gave me one last look. It wasn't dismissal. It wasn't invitation. It was unfinished. And when the door opened, I knew this wasn't going to leave me alone. The door had opened, the moment dissolved, but the silence between us didn't. It followed me, through the clatter of voices, through the casual distractions that filled the evening. And when it was finally just us again, I realized I hadn't imagined it. She leaned against the counter, arms folded, her eyes on me as though she hadn't looked away all night. There was something careful in the way she stood, like every inch of distance she put between us was intentional. "You're too young to talk like that," she said, finally breaking the quiet. I wanted to laugh, but her tone stopped me. Not unkind, just heavy, as though she'd had to say that before. Maybe too many times. "I'm 23, I answered, as if the number alone could close the gap. Her lips pressed into the faintest smile. That's the problem. The words sat between us. I wanted to ask what she meant, why it mattered so much, but instead I just watched her. And she let me, though not comfortably. She shifted her weight, as though her body betrayed the restlessness she didn't want me to see. I didn't know her past, not in detail, but the shadows of it were everywhere. A ring absent on her finger, but a faint line still marking the skin. The way she caught herself smiling and immediately stopped, as if she wasn't supposed to. Loneliness clung to her like perfume, subtle, invisible, but undeniable once noticed. "You don't know what you're looking at," she said, almost to herself. But I did. I saw her tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, the way her shoulders dropped when she thought no one noticed, the quiet fatigue in her eyes that didn't match the strength in her voice. And it made me want to stay closer, not further. When she reached past me for her phone, her hand brushed my shoulder. Barely, but enough. She froze, her fingers lingering just a moment too long before pulling away. I pretended not to notice, though every nerve in me burned with the memory of that touch. You should be careful, she whispered, almost like a warning to herself. But then she didn't move. She stayed close, her breath brushing against my cheek as she looked down at her screen, her body tilted toward mine in a way she could have avoided but didn't. I said nothing. I couldn't. I was afraid that if I spoke, the spell would break. For a moment, we were suspended in something fragile and dangerous, something neither of us was willing to admit out loud. Her hand grazed the counter beside mine, close enough that if either of us shifted, our fingers would touch. She didn't. I didn't. Instead, she glanced at me, and for the first time, her guard faltered. A pause, a silence, a flicker of something that looked almost like surrender. And in that silence, without words, I knew we'd both already stepped closer than we should. The night stretched longer than it should have, and somehow we ended up alone again. She was by the window, her profile cut against the glow of the streetlight, and I was too aware of how quiet the room felt with just us in it. People talk, you know, she said, not looking at me. About what? About everything. About nothing. Doesn't matter. She let the words trail off, her arms folding tighter across her chest. I stepped closer, too close, until I could see the faint tension in her jaw, the flicker of her breath when she realized I hadn't stopped. You care what they think? I asked softer this time. Her lips parted, but she didn't answer. She only shifted, and for a moment, our shoulders brushed. The touch was accidental, or maybe not, but it sent a jolt through me all the same. She turned then, and her eyes caught mine. For a heartbeat, we didn't move. Her gaze dropped to my mouth and back again, and I swear, the world narrowed to just that silent space between us. Then, her phone buzzed on the table. The sound cracked through the moment. She pulled back, almost too quickly, fumbling for the device as though it had saved her. A message lit the screen, but she didn't open it. Her hand lingered on the phone, unmoving, while her shoulders rose and fell with a quiet, uneven breath. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My pulse was too loud, too obvious. Finally, she set the phone down without answering and turned back to me. This can't happen, she whispered, though her feet betrayed her, stepping closer instead of away. We haven't done anything, I said. My voice was steadier than I felt. Her hand lifted, hovered like she might touch my chest, then stopped halfway. That's the problem, she murmured, almost a confession. The air between us thickened. Every inch felt dangerous. Her perfume, subtle, warm, undeniably hers, pulled me closer until I could feel the heat radiating off her skin. I leaned in, not enough to cross the line, but enough to blur it. She didn't move back. Her breath brushed against my cheek, uneven, waiting. And then, footsteps outside. She froze. We both did. The muffled sound passed down the hall, fading, but it was enough to remind us what this was: fragile, reckless, too close to breaking. Still, when the danger passed, neither of us stepped apart. Her hand, trembling just slightly, touched my wrist before she caught herself and pulled away. But the ghost of her touch lingered, seared into my skin. Her eyes met mine one last time, pleading, resisting, wanting. And though we hadn't kissed, hadn't spoken the truth, the distance between us was gone. We were already inside the storm. She had been avoiding me all week. Short replies, averted glances, conversations cut before they began. But tonight, she couldn't avoid me. Not in the quiet of the kitchen, not with the dim light washing her face in soft shadow, not with the way we ended up standing too close again. You should stop looking at me that way, she said, her tone sharp, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. I can't. She turned, finally facing me. You think this is simple? You're a boy with time to waste. I don't have that luxury. I'm not a boy, I said, stepping closer, the distance collapsing. And you don't have to pretend you don't feel it too. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she pressed her palms flat against the counter behind her, as if steadying herself. I leaned in, slow enough to give her time to move away. She didn't. Say it, I whispered, my voice brushing against her ear. She exhaled sharply, her breath trembling. You make me forget myself, she confessed, the words spilling out like she hadn't meant to say them aloud. The admission snapped something open between us. I lifted a hand, brushing a strand of hair from her face, my fingers grazing her temple. She closed her eyes at the touch, just for a second, then opened them again, dark, conflicted, burning. You don't know what you're doing, she murmured, but her body leaned toward mine, her shoulder brushing my chest. I know exactly what I'm doing, I said. My hand lingered at her cheek, then slid down, barely grazing her jaw, slow, deliberate. Her breath hitched. She gripped the counter harder, as though that could anchor her. This isn't fair, she said, her voice breaking between defiance and surrender. What's not fair? That you look at me like I'm the only one. I swallowed hard. Because you are. The words hung in the air, too raw, too irreversible. Her lips parted, her eyes flickering between mine and my mouth, and for the first time, she didn't pull away. The silence was deafening. My heartbeat thundered, hers just as quick beneath the stillness of her body leaning against mine. I tilted closer, close enough to feel the warmth of her breath, the faint tremble in her chest. Her hand lifted, as if she was going to push me away, but instead, her fingers brushed lightly against my shirt, resting there. The distance between us dissolved, our faces inches apart. One more breath, and we'd be past the point of no return. And then, her voice, low, unsteady, almost a plea. If you do this, nothing will be the same. Her words, nothing will be the same, were still hovering between us when the knock came. Sharp, unexpected, enough to jolt us both back into ourselves. She stepped away fast, too fast, pressing a hand to her chest like she needed to catch her breath. I backed off instinctively, though my pulse still thundered. The door cracked open. A friend leaned in, casual, unsuspecting. Hey, didn't mean to interrupt. Just needed to grab something. We both froze, too still, as though our bodies confessed what our mouths didn't. But the friend either didn't notice or chose not to. A book was picked up, a brief nod, and then the door closed again. Silence. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one was dangerous, charged, trembling. She pressed her palms to the counter again, staring at the floor. They saw, she whispered. No, I said quickly. They didn't. You don't know that. Her voice cracked, not loud, but fragile. She turned to me then, her eyes sharper, wet at the edges. Do you understand what this would look like? What people would say about me? Her fear was real, and it hit me harder than I expected. The age gap that felt like nothing in the quiet suddenly felt like a wall built of other people's judgment. Still, I couldn't stop looking at her. The way her hands trembled as she tried to steady herself. The way she avoided my eyes yet leaned just slightly toward me, as if her body betrayed the very thing her voice resisted. You think I don't care what they'd say? I stepped closer, my voice low. I do. But I'd rather face that than pretend this isn't real. She shook her head, brushing past me. Too close, her arm grazing mine. That accidental touch was louder than words. I felt her hesitation in the way she slowed, as though she wanted me to stop her. I did. My hand caught her wrist, gentle, deliberate. Her breath stuttered. She turned, half angry, half helpless. You don't know what you're asking of me. Then tell me. I whispered, leaning in. Tell me to let go. Her lips trembled. Her body stayed close. But she didn't say it. Instead, she exhaled, long, shuddering, before pulling her hand free. I shouldn't want this, she admitted, the words spilling out like a secret ripped open. But I do. The room went still. That was the revelation, the truth she had been burying under warnings and distance. And now it was out, raw and irreversible. We stood there, both changed. Her confession had broken something open, and though her body turned away, her eyes lingered on me, almost pleading. And I knew, in that instant, neither of us could go back. Her confession hung in the air. I shouldn't want this, but I do. The words shook the ground beneath us. She turned as if to leave, but stopped halfway, her back still to me. I could see the faint tremor in her shoulders, the way her fingers curled into fists as if holding herself together. I took one step, then another. Close enough now that I could hear her breath, uneven and shallow. Say the word, I whispered, my voice low, and I'll walk away. She turned slowly, and when her eyes met mine, I knew she couldn't say it. Not because she lacked the strength, but because the truth had already slipped out of her grasp. We stood inches apart. Every nerve in me was alive, tuned to the smallest details. The warmth radiating off her skin, the faint brush of her sleeve against my arm, the way her lips parted like she was on the edge of speaking but couldn't find the words. You'll regret this, she murmured, though her voice faltered. Not for a second, I answered. I lifted a hand, brushing a strand of hair from her face. My fingers lingered against her temple, tracing down her cheek before I could stop myself. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, leaning just slightly into the touch, and when she opened them again, something had broken open, raw, unguarded. The air was thick, heavy with what we weren't saying. She leaned back against the counter as though her body needed support, but her eyes never left mine. "This will change everything," she said, her tone sharp but trembling. "It already has." The silence after that was unbearable. My chest ached with it. I leaned closer, until my forehead nearly touched hers, until I could feel the tremble of her breath on my lips. Her hand lifted, hesitant, trembling, before resting against my chest. Not pushing me away, just feeling. Her fingers clutched my shirt, the smallest act of surrender, but it was enough. I bent closer, ready to cross that last impossible line, but she caught me with a whisper. "If we do this, you can't undo it." "I don't want to undo it," I breathed. Her lips hovered inches from mine. 1 second, 2. The world collapsed to nothing but the fragile space between us. And then, finally, she closed it. Her lips touched mine, soft at first, tentative, like testing the edge of a fire. Then deeper, breaking open with years of restraint, her hand gripping my shirt tighter as if afraid I'd disappear. The kiss wasn't polished, wasn't perfect. It was messy, raw, human, exactly what it was supposed to be. When we finally pulled apart, both of us unsteady, the silence was different. Not hesitant, not fearful, clear. She looked at me, eyes dark but steady, and for the first time, there were no barriers. "I see you," she whispered, and I knew she meant it. The kiss left the room impossibly quiet. Not the silence of hesitation anymore, but the silence of two people who had crossed a line they couldn't uncross. She leaned back slightly, her hand still gripping my shirt, her eyes searching mine with a vulnerability I hadn't seen before. For the first time, she wasn't guarded, wasn't hiding behind sharp words or warnings. "This terrifies me," she admitted softly. I brushed my thumb across the back of her hand. "It terrifies me too." Her lips curved, faintly, almost a smile. "You shouldn't be scared. You're young. You don't understand what this costs." "Maybe," I said, taking her hand fully, lacing my fingers through hers. "But I understand what it costs if I walk away." The words hung there, not grand, not rehearsed, just real. And something in her eyes shifted. The fear didn't vanish, but it softened into something warmer. She leaned against me then, slowly, carefully, until her head rested against my chest. I wrapped an arm around her, feeling how small and strong and fragile she felt all at once. The world outside the room might have been ready to tear this apart, but in that moment, none of it touched us. Her breath steadied against me, slower now. My hand smoothed over her back, not needing more, just needing closeness. She whispered, "I haven't let anyone this close in years." I lowered my forehead to hers, closing the space with something gentler than a kiss, something steadier. "Then don't let go now." Her fingers tightened around mine. Not perfect, not without fear, but with decision. She lifted her face to me, pressing a quiet kiss to my cheek. Small, but carrying more weight than anything before it. And then we sat there, side by side, her head leaning against me, my hands still intertwined with hers, the night stretching quietly forward. There was no promise of forever, no neat resolution to all the risks and doubts. But there was this, the warmth of her body pressed to mine, the trust of her hand in my hand, and the certainty that we had chosen this, together. It was enough. When she finally looked up at me, there was no hesitation in her eyes, just a quiet, steady truth. "We'll figure it out," she said. And I believed her. Speech Balloon, did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?